Good evening, and welcome to the Cobb County Republican Women's Club televised forum of 2014. I'm Barbara Hickey, CCRWC President, and this is the third in a series of 5 forums. Tonight's forum will be for the candidates in the United States Senate race. Please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. The Cobb County Republicans Women's Club was organized 50 years ago and is the largest Republican women's organization in Georgia. We are a member of the Georgia Federation of Republican Women and the National Federation of Republican Women. CCRWC provides an excellent opportunity to network with elected officials and feel more connected to the political education issues and candidates. It also provides a vehicle to get involved in candidate campaigns through volunteering. Through CCRWC, you become an informed voter, having input into the political process and influencing decisions that open the door to good government. We invite you to become a member and join us for lunch. We meet the 4th Friday of the month at the Marietta Conference Center. Women and men are welcome to join our organization. For more information about CCRWC, visit the Cobb County Republican Women's Club website at www.ccrwc.org. I would like to speak to you this evening on the importance of voting. The right to vote is a privilege, but first you must be registered. April 21st is the last day to register and be eligible to vote in the general primary on May 20th and in the runoff on July 22nd. If you have any questions about your registration, voting absentee or early voting, call the Cobb County Elections Registration Office at 770-528-2581 or visit the website at www.cobbelections.org. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now my pleasure to introduce our moderator for this evening's forum, Martha Zoller. Martha is a co-host of Georgia's Morning News with Zoller and Bryant. Georgia's Morning News was ranked in the top 100 radio talk shows in America. She's the editor-in-chief of zpolitics.com and a longtime Republican activist. Martha ran a very impressive campaign for Congress in 2012 and is currently the president of the Hall County Republican Women's Club. We are honored to have Martha with us tonight. Please welcome her.
Thank you, Barbara. This is our third televised Republican Forum in a series of 5 sponsored by the Cobb County Republican Women's Club. Tonight's forum is for the candidates of the United States Senate. Thank you to TV23 staff for their assistance in broadcasting this forum tonight, the candidates for participating in this event, and the viewing audience and the studio audience. Since this is a live broadcast, we ask the audience to please turn off their cell phones and pagers to lessen the distractions and noise. Please also refrain from applause until the end of the forum due to time restraints. Our 3 panelists for the evening are Megan Myers-Hanson. Megan is in her 2nd term as the chairman of the Georgia Young Republicans and her 1st term as the chairman of the State Chairman's Association for Young Republicans National Federation. She is also an attorney for a firm in Cobb County, enjoys spending time with her husband, David, and their 2 chocolate Labradors. Ann Lewis is a partner in the Atlanta law firm of Strickland, Brockington, Lewis, LLP. Her practice includes business and governmental affair litigation, redistricting, and election law. She has represented the Georgia GOP for the last 12 years, first as the Assistant General Counsel and now as General Counsel. Ann is a member of the executive and state committees of the Georgia GOP and is a member of the executive board of the DeKalb County Republican Party and the 6th District Republican Committee. She serves on the Board of Governors of the Republican National Lawyers Association and the executive board of the Atlanta chapter of the Federalist Society. Ann and her husband Brad have 2 boys, Kevin and Kyle, and live in DeKalb County. Dr. Camilla Moore. Camilla Moore has had more than 30 years of conservative activism. She has served the party in a number of critical ways. First and second vice chairman of the Georgia Republican Party, chairman of the newly formed 13th Congressional District, team captain in Bush v. Gore, Broward County, national delegate to the National Republican Convention since 1995, national, state, and local surrogate, and recently appointed by the Republican National Committee as one of 20 national advisors on African American affairs. Camilla is a political analyst, lecturer, author, and political commentator, having appeared on CNN, CBS, ABC, and local network stations. She is a member of numerous Republican organizations, including Middle Georgia Republican Women's Club. Our format this evening will be: each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement. They will field questions, and the candidates will be given 1 minute to respond. Each candidate will be given a 2-minute closing statements. For the candidates, there is a timekeeper sitting at the table in front of you. There will be a 30-second warning card, and a bell will ring to end. You must stop speaking when the bell rings. The Cobb County Republican Women's Club contacted all the Republican candidates for United States Senate. If your candidate is not here this evening, it is because they were unable to attend. We have 2 candidates that were unable to attend tonight. Both have submitted a 1-minute written statement in accordance with the rules, and I will read them now. From Representative Jack Kingston. Dear friends, I am sorry I can't be with you tonight due to a previous commitment. Libby and I have enjoyed spending so much time in Cobb County and are certain to be back there again soon. We are running a positive, issue-oriented campaign focused on my 6-point plan to restore the American dream: strengthening our national defense, balancing the budget, stopping job-killing regulations like Obamacare, achieving energy independence, promoting workfare over welfare, and simplifying the tax code. Much like the contract with America, my plan provides a unifying vision for our future and can serve as a rallying point for conservatives across the country. We are proud of our team in Cobb County, which is led by Bill Atkins and Nancy Couch, as well as State Reps Earl Earhart and Sharon Cooper, Public Service Commissioner Stan Wise, Marietta Councilman Stuart Fleming, Smyrna Councilman Ron Fennell, Michael Paris, Bob Prilliman, and Fred Keith. With their help and yours, we will take back the Senate and send Harry Reid packing. Again, Libby and I are sorry we cannot be with you. We look forward to seeing you again soon and hope we can count on your support. Sincerely, Jack Kingston. And from the David Perdue for U.S. Senate campaign, I'm sorry I couldn't be with you tonight. The first thing you should know about me is I am not a politician. Instead, I've spent the last 40 years in private enterprise helping companies, large and small, grow their businesses and create jobs. Eventually, I worked my way up to become CEO of the Reebok athletic brand and Dollar General stores. I have never run for public office before now, but I am truly concerned about the direction of our country. We are facing a very real fiscal crisis due to irresponsible government policies and have led to a crushing federal debt and a struggling economy. I believe it will take a political outsider with the right experience to help solve the problems career politicians have created. In the Senate, I want to focus on solving our immediate debt crisis and helping to get our economy back on track. I also believe we need term limits to end the Washington mentality that exists today, where career politicians are more worried about their own reelection than solving our nation's pressing problems. If we want different results from Washington, I believe we have to send a different type of person to Washington. Our panel of candidates for United States Senators are Paul Broun, Art Gardner, Phil Gingrey, Derrick Grayson, and Karen Handel. Mr. Broun, we will begin with your 1-minute opening statement.
Thank you, Martha. Friends, the federal government is totally out of control, and both parties have built this huge federal government that is spending too much, taxing too much, regulating too much, and borrowing too much. We've got to stop it, and that's what I've been doing in the 6.5 years I've been in the U.S. House. I'm an original intent constitutionalist. I believe we need to make major changes and send powers back to the states or the people. Let me give you an example. I'd like to close the Department of Education totally, get rid of Common Core, and pay our teachers more and get the federal government out of the classroom. I'd like to close down the EPA and get its heavy boot off the throat of our job producers as well as our economy. Those are just some examples. We've got to go back to constitutionally limited government as our founding fathers meant it, and I'm the candidate in this race who's been fighting to do so in the U.S. House of Representatives. That's what I'll do as your U.S. Senator.
Art Gardner.
Thank you. My name is Art Gardner, and I'm a very long-time Cobb County resident. My wife and I have been married 32 years. We've lived in Cobb County for over 30 years. Our children all went to Wheeler High School. I was a car mechanic for 10 years, an engineer for Lockheed for 5 years, and I've been a patent attorney for 26 years. I'm not a Me Too candidate. The Atlanta paper has referred to me as the un-Tea Party candidate. I guess that makes me a little different from the rest. First thing you need to know is that I'm out to fix the budget problem. I'm a budget hawk. Second thing is, though, that I believe that the party needs to change its hard right social positions in order to be successful going forward and win a lot of elections. The third thing is I have proposed a game-changing reform to the patent laws to lower your monthly cost for prescription medicines. And you'll be reading more about that in the coming weeks. I ask for your vote.
Thank you. Phil Gingrey.
I'm Dr. Phil Gingrey, and I live about 2 miles from here. Georgia is my home, but Cobb County and Marietta for the last 38 years has been my home. I have delivered 5,200 babies in this community. I tell people all the time that when they ask me, should I call you Congressman Gingrey or Dr. Gingrey, I say you call me Dr. Gingrey. I'm a doctor first. I'm a career physician, not a career politician. But I'm very, very concerned about health care in this country. I think it ought to be market-driven. It ought to be between a doctor and her patient and not some federal bureaucrat from Washington. That's why I have called for the complete repeal of Obamacare and replace it with something that truly does work. And I have made that pledge to you and to the people of Georgia. I'll fulfill that pledge as your next United States Senator. Thank you.
Derrick Grayson.
Of course, my name is Derrick Grayson. I was asked, why am I running? I'm running because the power has been taken from the people, because we have not stood up and demanded more from those who are supposed to be representing us. I'm running because I want that power returned to the people. Well, how do we make that happen? We have to demand that our representatives obey the Constitution. I constantly speak of 100% of the Constitution, 100% of the time. If we get back to that, our troops will have better aftercare. Our tax system would be reformed. Education would be returned back to the states, along with many of the other issues that many are running and stating that they're going to fix when it is Washington that has created the problems in the first place. If less than 100% of the Constitution is okay for you, continue what you've been doing.
Thank you. Karen Handel.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here this evening. I'm Karen Handel, and I believe that results matter. As a business person with KPMG, with Seba Vision Corporation, and as CEO of one of the largest chambers of commerce, I learned that lesson very well. I also believe that results matter in elected office too. As Fulton County Commission Chairman, I took on the Democrats to hold off a 3 mil property tax increase so that we could deal with the budget with spending cuts, not with a tax increase. As your Secretary of State, I made sure that vital business services were delivered, ensured that photo ID was implemented, and I did all of that while also cutting the budget by 20%. We need new leadership in Washington. We need a United States Senator who is going to have the guts and the resolve to actually get real results for the people of our state and the people of this country so that we cut spending, we deal with the debt, and we get our economy going again so that more people have good quality jobs. I look forward to answering your questions tonight.
Thank you. We'll now begin with the questioning. You have 1 minute for your response. You'll be notified as to 30 seconds left. When the bell rings, you must stop speaking. The first question is from Megan Hansen, and we'll begin answers with Art Gardner. Megan Hansen.
Good evening, and thank you for being willing to run for United States Senate. If you are elected as Georgia's next senator, which committees will you choose or will you ask for, and why?
Art Gardner.
First and foremost, I want to be on the Judiciary Committee because I believe that we need to control who is going up on the United States Supreme Court, who's going on the courts of appeals, and who are becoming our district court judges. We need to make sure that those individuals adhere to the Constitution. I am a original intent strict constructionist as it applies to the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't say what we want it to say today. It says what it says, and we need judges who will adhere to that. We can't allow judges to reinterpret the Constitution according to the whims of the day. That is not the way forward. In addition, we need to provide more geographic and regional diversity on these courts. Too much on the Supreme Court, we're having exactly the same type of people from the Northeast, and we need to provide people from the South, the West, and all over this country.
Thank you. Phil Gingrey.
Martha, I will ask to be on the HELP committee. That's an acronym, Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions. Obviously, the most important aspect of that acronym to me is health and health care. And that's, of course, why I've made that pledge to the people of Georgia, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, to repeal Obamacare in my first term or go home. That might seem like a bold pledge to many people, but it is an accountability pledge. It's putting skin in the game. I want to put pressure on myself to tell you, the people of Georgia, that I will do this for you. I'm not making a lame term limit pledge and go up there as a potted plant and do nothing, but I will deliver for you just as I've delivered those 5,200 babies in and around Cobb County. So the HELP committee, without question, Martha, is the committee that I will ask for.
Derrick Grayson.
A committee for tax reform. The IRS is one of the greatest overreaching arms of the government that we have today. They literally have caused people to take their own lives because of government having this adversarial arm. I would like to see the 16th Amendment repealed, and I would like to see the fair tax implemented so that we can begin to get government out of our pockets. And I'll add to that, the taxes that we pay is predicated upon a lie. With the amount of debt that we have, it doesn't matter what we pay in taxes because it's not enough to pay off $17 trillion. Why? Because they have the Federal Reserve and they create unlimited tolls of money, and they are killing this country. So we need to first stop the government. We need to repeal the 16th Amendment, implement the fair tax, and we need to shut down the Federal Reserve.
Thank you. Karen Handel.
Thank you. As your United States Senator, I understand that I'm there to represent the interests of Georgia, and for that, and not my own. And for that reason, I'll seek a position on the Agriculture Committee to represent our largest economic interests in this state, and also armed services, because I understand that our military has such a broad footprint in our state. And in other areas, I'm going to be a champion for cutting spending and look to be engaged in whatever way I can to roll back spending and cut the federal budget. A champion for the fair tax, not just someone who slaps my name on there as a co-sponsor, but a real advocate and a champion for moving forward with common sense rewrite of our tax code, and also a champion for term limits. I think the time has come for term limits. We've gotten so far away from what our founding fathers ever intended, and Washington has now become a way of life instead of a job where the best interests of the people are represented.
Thank you. Paul Broun.
Megan, I'll ask to be on the Senate Armed Services Committee. I'm a U.S. Marine. In fact, I'm the only combat veteran in this race. I was deployed to Afghanistan as a Navy medical doctor. And national security, national defense should be the major function of the federal government under the Constitution. We must have a stronger national defense. We've had 4 presidents, 2 Republican and 2 Democrats, that have steadily degraded our defense capability here in this country. In fact, I was talking to a 3-star Army general the other day, and he told me he did not have enough rounds of ammunition in his command for his soldiers to go back to the rifle range and requalify. I've talked to pilots. They don't have enough jet fuel to fly their helicopters and jets. We've got to have a strong national defense, and as original intent constitutionalists, a strong national defense should be the major function of the federal government. We don't have enough wings in the Air Force. We don't have enough ships in the Navy. We don't have enough brigades in the Army, and God knows we don't have enough Marines. I'll fight for a strong national defense and make sure that we build our defense capability.
Thank you. The second question is from Ann Lewis.
Good evening, and I want to echo Megan's thanks to you for being willing to serve me and all of our fellow Georgians in the United States Senate. The question I have for you is this. Having failed to persuade Congress to pass several pieces of legislation, President Obama seems to have become somewhat of a super legislator through the use of executive orders. What should the response of the Senate be?
And we'll begin with Phil Gingrey.
And it's a great question, and as you alluded, the House of Representatives, which is under the control, thank goodness, of the Republican Party, we have passed numerous pieces of legislation to rein in excessive spending, of course, but also rules and regulations that come down through the energy and the EPA that are killing businesses in this country. They're job killers. They make no sense. That's why I've supported bills like the REINS Act, which would make sure that any rule or regulation that comes down from the executive branch of this government, if it costs the economy more than $100 million, then we in the Congress can reject those rules and they will never get into the Federal Register. That's the most important thing. We pass bills in the House of Representatives, they go to the Senate, and they die on Harry Reid's desk. We have to get rid of him first and foremost by taking over the Senate, electing Phil Gingrey and 6 others.
Thank you. Derrick Grayson next.
I want to be clear about this. Ronald Reagan once said, Washington will not fix itself. They like it this way. If we want to change what is taking place in Washington, the people will have to take back what is theirs, what is their heritage, and from a constitutional perspective. If we want change, people that go to D.C. to represent us need to be willing to expose those that are destroying this country. And you should be tired of people blaming a single solitary individual such as Obama. He has help from both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, who sit back and they connive to allow what has been taking place in Washington to proceed. And the only way to stop it is for you, the American people, to take out the trash. But they need to be exposed first, and that is what I will bring to the table.
Karen Handel.
Thank you. You know, the hard truth is that we are where we are today because of a fundamental lack of leadership on both sides of the political aisle. And it is easy to blame the White House. It's easy to blame the Democrats. But we've had accommodating Republicans that have helped to bring us to this place. The key, step one, is to achieve a majority in the United States Senate for the GOP, and then to be smart and strategic about achieving the White House back in the hands of the GOP. And that candidly rests with each one of us in getting out to vote, making sure that we identify the strongest candidate in this race to beat Michelle Nunn, and then making sure we all get out and vote and work very hard for that. In this race, I am that strongest individual. And I think it also comes down to message and messenger for the Republican Party to make sure that we have a good, solid, conservative message, that we articulate a real vision to the American people of how conservative principles really do lift people up the economic ladder, really do make lives better. And when we do that, the president won't be able to get away with using executive orders to undercut that.
Paul Broun.
And the other candidates have said, and I agree, that both parties are guilty of building this government that is just totally out of control. And what I've been doing ever since I've been in the House is meeting with some of the strongest conservatives in the House and the Senate as well to try to strategize a direction of how we rein in this out of control government. In the Senate, there are 3 primary people that I've been working with. That's Ted Cruz, Rand Paul, Mike Lee. There are others that come and join us at times. There are a handful of us in the House also that meet with the senators. But we've got to return to a constitutionally limited government as our founding fathers meant for it to be. And unfortunately, our leadership doesn't understand that. In fact, when we came to voting for Speaker of the House of Representatives in this Congress, I thought we needed somebody with a backbone to stand up to Harry Reid and Barack Obama. And I voted for Alan West to be the Speaker, and we'll continue to fight to put this country back on constitutional reins.
Art Gardner.
Thank you. What a great question. I think it presumes that the Republican Party is going to win the Senate in 2014, which is a pretty good bet. So the question is, what are we going to do with that power once we have it? And it's sort of beyond the Senate's ability to control the president. The Constitution sets up these three branches of government with separate powers. We've got this separation of powers. The Congress cannot control what the president does. However, once we have the power, when we have control of both the House and the Senate, we'll have the ability to deal with the president from a position of strength. And at that moment, we should reach out from that position of strength and reach across the aisle and try to find ideas and programs that will move the country forward. If we can do it in a bipartisan way, that's the way forward. That's the way we can grow the party. That will be in the best interest of the country and the party in the long run.
And the third question is from Dr. Camilla Moore, and we'll start with Derrick Grayson.
Good afternoon, and I'd like to echo my colleagues by saying thank you for your willingness to serve. The Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, which we know as Obamacare, is as unfavorable today as it was in 2010. However, there are two elements of this act which the public does embrace. That is coverage for existing conditions and the ability to keep children on your insurance policy until they're 26. Are you in total repeal of the act? And if so, what would you do with these two elements that the public embraces? And what is your plan?
Derrick Grayson.
Many are talking about repealing Obamacare and then replacing it. That's the problem in the first place, people. The federal government has no business in the insurance industry. That is for the private sector to deal with. And I think Americans, businesses especially, are smart enough to address those issues if the people will make it known where their issues are. The federal government overstepped its reach by taking control of 1/6 of our economy. I want Obamacare repealed, but I don't want it replaced by the federal government. There are things that could be done, such as portability of insurance if you leave one company and go to another one, high-risk pools for those with pre-existing conditions. But either way, this is something that belongs at the state level and not at the federal government. And if you continue to allow people to go to Washington to give government more power, we will always be on the short end of the stick.
Karen Handel.
Thank you. The Obama health care tax, and that's what it is, an $800 billion tax, needs to be repealed in its entirety. We do also need to set up the legal framework. I support HR 2300 that would allow for portability of plans. It sets up high-risk pools. It has additional tort reform in it. But make no mistake about it, the way the current bill is set up, it is a gross infringement on your relationship with your doctor. There is nothing caring about it, and there is nothing affordable about it. We are seeing, as a direct result of the Obama healthcare tax, some of the steepest increases in health insurance premiums that we have seen in decades. That new study just came out. Families are being hurt. I met a woman who she was told her plan was over. She had to find a new plan. She was in the middle of fighting a 5-year battle with cancer. So we need to repeal it in its entirety and then put in place common sense, patient-centered, market-driven healthcare reforms like those called for in Congressman Tom Price's bill, HR 2300.
Paul Broun.
Camilla, there's nothing in Obamacare that's fixable. It must be ripped out by the roots. And I've got the plan. It's called the Patient Option Act. It's HR 2900 in this Congress. But it repeals Obamacare in its totality. But it puts in place policy that puts patients in charge. 3 phrases will tell you what it does. It's your doctor, your insurance, your choices. In fact, my bill has been endorsed by the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons. It's also been endorsed by FreedomWorks. It's the only Republican plan that totally keeps a federal bureaucrat from making health care decisions for you or anyone. All the rest of the Republican plans still have the federal government engaged in making those health care decisions. It's a 77-page, market-based, patient-centered plan that totally gets the federal government out of making health care decisions for anyone, and that's the reason it's been endorsed by those two groups. It's the kind of policy we need. It makes health insurance cheaper for everybody, provides access to good quality health care for all Americans, and saves Medicare from going broke.
Art Gardner.
Thank you. Before the Affordable Care Act, was passed, or the Unaffordable Care Act, as many people call it. Before that was passed, our healthcare system worked pretty well. We had some specific problems with the system, but overall, the system worked pretty well. Now, Obamacare is going to get repealed, or it's going to fail on its own. So what are we going to do as a country after that? Well, what we should do is we should target those specific problems that existed prior to Obamacare with very narrowly targeted solutions. We don't need to upset the entire system to fix a few specific problems. And that's what we need to do.
Thank you. Phil Gingrey.
Dr. Moore, the things that you mentioned, of course, are in the realm of health insurance reform. So you've got 2 or 3 things where you reform health insurance in 2,700-page bill. It's not health care reform. I would dare to say that if it wasn't for Obamacare and it's killing jobs in this country, that you wouldn't have 26-year-olds living at home with mom and dad and having to be on their health insurance policy. No, we absolutely need to get rid of Obamacare and replace it with something that truly does work. After all, in this country, we have the greatest health care system in the world. If that were not true, why is it then since we enacted Medicare that we've probably increased the life expectancy of men and women in this country by 15 years? We have a great health care system. We need to bring down the cost, but we need to start over and get it done right. President Obama has made promises about lowering your health insurance premium, about if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your health insurance policy, you can keep it. We know that's not true.
Thank you. Fourth question is from Megan Hansen.
We've all heard about the Savannah Port project being stalled. What would you do to help move this along?
Karen Handel.
Yes, thank you. Well, I certainly hope that when I'm sworn in as United States Senator, we're not still talking about having to move the project along. Candidly, time is of the essence to get our port expanded. We're already behind schedule, and certainly the latest setback is owned by President Obama and the Obama administration. But this has been a project that has been 17 years in the making, and for those of you in the audience or watching, how many of you have had 17 years to get your job done at work? You don't. We needed to have real priorities about moving this project forward long before now. The next opportunity is in the WRDA bill, the Water Resources Development Act, and I am optimistic and hopeful that we will be able to secure what we need to do. In the meantime, if the state can move forward, I think they should do so expeditiously, regardless of what the White House would say.
Paul Broun.
Megan, this issue has really brought members of Congress, Democrats, Republicans alike, leadership here in the state of Georgia, our governor, the mayor of Atlanta, Kasim Reed, all of us are fighting very hard to get the Savannah port deepened. It's a critical issue not only for economic development throughout the state of Georgia, but it's also a critical economic development and a national security issue for the whole country. Every single member of Congress in Georgia, Democrat and Republican alike, are doing everything that can be done, but this administration and previous administrations have blocked the deepening of the harbor. We'll all continue to fight, and I can guarantee you no matter who gets elected to the U.S. Senate, we're going to elect a Republican U.S. Senator, but whoever of this crowd, I promise you, is going to continue to work hard to get it done. It's absolutely critical, and as Karen Handel said, the WRDA bill, hopefully it's going to be passed. Just in the next few weeks when we get back to Washington, we'll start that process and start digging.
Art Gardner.
Well, first of all, I believe that the deepening of the port has been held up for purely political reasons. I've said that before. And I believe that once this election is over, those political considerations which have caused the administration to hold up the port deepening will go away, and we'll have an atmosphere that will allow us to continue to move that process forward. And to help make that go more smoothly, we need to work with the White House. There's been too much of a no compromise attitude in Washington of late. There's been too much of a my way or the highway. There hasn't been enough steadfast commitment to working with people across the aisle. We need to reach across the aisle to the Democrats. When Ronald Reagan was the president, he worked with a very liberal Speaker of the House. That's the model we need to follow again. And so the answer is you've got to be willing to work with the Democrats. And in this case, that means President Obama for a couple more years.
Phil Gingrey.
Well, I hope Art Gardner is wrong. I hope the president is not playing political games and punishing the people of Georgia for something that's so important to our 10 million citizens and in the entire Southeast. Now, as you know, this is a federal-state partnership project, and the federal government is committed to $450 million to the project. The state of Georgia is committed to something like $250 million. We have our money. We've raised our money. All we're asking the federal government at this point is let us get started. We do need to pass this water bill and make sure that the Corps of Engineers gives us the blessing to go ahead and start digging. And then we'll go to the federal government and make them pay their fair share. And I think that they will. This is an economic issue in the state of Georgia. Atlanta might be the economic engine of this state, but this is a project that helps every person in the entire state, 10 million people. We've got to get it done.
Thank you. Derrick Grayson.
Federal overreach, and I said that earlier. Everybody, again, we're blaming the Obama administration. This goes back 17 years. Why is nobody mentioning Clinton's name or Bush's name? This is nothing but political games that are being played with the American people. And the state of Georgia has allowed the federal government to overstep its bounds yet once again, and the job has not gotten done. Can you say Bundy, government overreach again, confiscating a man's cattle over money when they should have filed a lien like everyone else has to? We continue to forget about what lies beneath, and at the heart of our issue, even in the Savannah River, is a violation of the Constitution, hubris towards the American people from those in D.C., and disdain for our Constitution. Only we can stop it.
Thank you. The fifth question will be from Ann Lewis, and we'll begin with Paul Broun.
Recently, the Supreme Court struck down the cap on aggregate political contributions. That is, the combined amount that a citizen could give to candidates and to the national political organizations. If the next case finds the Supreme Court striking down the limit on contributions to federal candidates, would that be a good thing or a bad thing?
And I think it'll be a good thing to do that because it's a freedom of speech issue, and that's what the Supreme Court held in this recent ruling. And in fact, the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom to redress our grievances, and our Second Amendment are the guardians of liberty in America. We must never, ever, ever lose those rights. And Congresses as well as courts have put muzzles on individuals. And I think the ruling by the Supreme Court was a good one. I applaud what they did because it allows people all across the country to contribute to whichever candidate they want and as many candidates as they want. And I think it's actually good for democracy. It's good for our republic. It's good to have the ability for candidates to be able to be supported by whoever they want, whoever they can get to contribute to their campaign. So I think it's a good ruling.
Art Gardner.
I totally disagree with what the Supreme Court has been doing in the area of campaign finance reform law. These decisions have been very bad for our democracy and will be worse going forward. It's not healthy for our democracy for the political discourse to be controlled by a few. We don't want only those people who can afford to make big contributions to have a seat at the table. Everybody should have a voice in this choir, not just the wealthy. And we should not allow the voices of a wealthy, anonymous few drown out the rest of the choir.
Phil Gingrey.
Well, and the question in regard to the limits that an individual can give to a federal candidate for the House of Representatives of the United States Senate, as we all know, is $5,200. I think the McCutcheon decision was the right decision, and I think that means, of course, that an individual if he or she wants to contribute $5,200 to 535 members of the Congress, every member of the House and every member of the Senate, they should be able to do that within those limits. But I think your question went further than that, and it's a question of, well, should an individual be able to give more than those limits, higher than $5,200? I think it's very apropos in this particular election because there is at least one self-funder among the 7 of us. That self-fund that happens not to be here tonight, but if somebody can put $20 million of their own money into a race, then why not at that point trigger the effect of letting everybody else have unlimited contributions to the candidate of their choice? If money is freedom of speech, that's what we ought to have.
Derrick Grayson.
I agree with Art Gardner. I did a video called The Circle of Loot. Them striking down this particular ruling, they've simply expanded the bamboozling of Americans. The richest people will simply sit back and say, who can we buy? And they can bypass the tomfoolery of PACs and super PACs. These candidates raise millions, they spend millions, and when they spend those millions to bombard you with corporate-backed media, that money goes right back to the people that gave it to them. They just simply want to bypass that now and allow the richest of the Americans to choose who gets to go to Washington, D.C. and represent their interests. Again, the power should belong to the people, and it should not be based upon who can raise the most money.
Thank you. Karen Handel.
Thank you. There's 2 issues here. One, the freedom of speech. Absolutely, we need to be supportive of that, and individuals should have a level playing field. And when it comes to the U.S. Senate race and other federal races, the individual does not have a level playing field against special interests and political action committees, because an individual can give $2,600 per person per election, while political action committee, the limit is higher. So we need to level that playing field. Secondly, what will also help in all of this is to implement term limits so that we get away from this constant re-election of people and individuals who are so beholden to special interests because they've made Washington a way of life and they want to stay there for the rest of their lives. Our founding fathers never intended that to be the case. And the giving rules, they are all set up to protect incumbency, so to the extent that we can level the playing field, move into term limits, I think that would help the process immensely and get us back to solving problems for America, not being focused on politics and getting reelected.
Thank you. The 6th question is from Dr. Camilla Moore.
Yes, immigration remains a hot button issue for conservatives. It is estimated that over 11 million undocumented immigrants live in the U.S. Do you support a path to citizenship for these folks as laid out by Senator Rubio? If not, what is your plan, and how do you intend on addressing these 11 million undocumented individuals that are here now?
Art Gardner.
I do not agree with the proposal to grant citizenship to people who have illegally crossed our borders or overstayed their visas. Instead, I propose a very practical solution of registering the people who are here illegally to turn them into taxpayers, recognizing the fact that they're here and we're not very successful at deporting them. The deportation rate is less than 45%, even among the people that you round up. So we've got a problem. We need to register them, turn them into taxpayers instead of benefit recipients. We need to end the practice of considering a child born in this country of a mother who is not here legally a U.S. citizen. The only way that I would give citizenship to any illegal alien is if they register for the military, serve 5 years, and obtain an honorable discharge. In that instance, I think they've earned it. Beyond that, no citizenship.
Thank you. Phil Gingrey.
Camilla, what we don't need is another omnibus bill like Obamacare in immigration reform or Dodd-Frank. And we pass these bills and nobody knows what's in them. I think Marco Rubio probably misspoke and maybe retracted what he said about amnesty. I don't think he's for granting amnesty. What we need to do is make sure that we enforce the laws of this country. and do like our sheriff here in Cobb County, Sheriff Neil Warren, the Honorable Neil Warren, who has been sheriff for 12 years and has served 40 years in public safety. He has enacted that 287G program so that if people commit serious crimes and they're in this country illegally, in this county illegally, where we have 435,000 illegal immigrants in the state of Georgia, then when they pay their debt to society for that crime that they have committed, in some cases violent crime, then they should be deported.
Derrick Grayson.
History repeats when you ignore it. This failed under Ronald Reagan. It will fail again. The approach I would take would be to streamline the immigration process, prosecute businesses who give them incentive to come here illegally in the first place, invalidate this system of anchor baby citizenship, better visa programs, and cut off social services to illegals. I am totally against amnesty in any form. If you want to come to this country, do it legally. Follow our rule of law. It goes right back to what I spoke of in my first opening statement. We need to obey our Constitution. If we won't obey our Constitution, why should others?
Karen Handel.
Thank you. I don't think there's any such thing as, quote, undocumented. An individual is either here legally or illegally. So that's number one. Number two, we need to stop apologizing for asking people to obey our laws. If we were in any other country in the world, we would be expected to obey their laws without any questions, no ifs, ands, or buts. No amnesty, no path to citizenship. We need to end the so-called anchor baby citizenship, and we need real enforcement. On the border, yes, the geographic border between the United States and Mexico, but also when it comes to visas, because 45% of the illegals in this country are people who skipped out on their visas in the first place. There's a law in place. Congress said that there should be a tracking system, entry, exit. It hasn't been done. And we also need to have robust enforcement, not just for those who have come here illegally, but for companies who actually persist in hiring illegals, so that we're pressing this issue from both sides.
Thank you. Paul Broun.
Until we secure the borders, nothing else matters. We've got tremendous problems with our legal immigration system, as well as with all the illegals that are in this country. But until we secure our borders and know who's coming in and who's going out, we're not going to solve this problem. Certainly, we need to have agricultural workers. We certainly need to have guest workers. We certainly need to bring people in this country that will go to school and will contribute to our society. But the immigration problem is broken, and until we secure the borders, nothing else matters. I have introduced a bill that says no amnesty for anybody for whatever reason through any immigration reform. But until we secure the borders, nothing else matters. The only new law I'd like to see now is one that makes English the official language of America.
Thank you. The seventh question is from Megan Hansen, and Phil Gingrey will start.
As a United States Senator, what is your role in promoting private sector growth in Georgia?
Well, Megan, the way you promote private sector growth, of course, is to let small businessmen and women do their work. And not burden them with rules and regulations coming down from the federal government that makes it impossible for them to start a small business. And 75 to 80% of jobs in this country are created by small businessmen and women. And to burden them with things like increasing the minimum wage when really they can barely afford to pay the minimum wage, and 2/3 of those people that are earning minimum wage are our young people, our teenagers that need to learn job skills. And within 1 year, most of them have already gotten a raise. And in some cases, I've talked to people that have hired these young people who have gone on and bought franchises and become successful businessmen and women. So the main thing that I can do as a member of the Senate is make sure that we take the handcuffs off the men and women in this country that create the jobs, the small businessmen and women.
Derrick Grayson.
It is government that has gotten in the way, that has caused the problem with the jobs in the first place. my senior advisor, Neil White, said that when he graduated from college, he had 7 job offers. Kids today can't even hardly find a job at McDonald's. One of the things that I would focus on is trying to get rid of these trade agreements that have put us at a disadvantage. You call Cisco's technical support, you get somebody in India. Those used to be American jobs, and the list goes on and on. Rein in government's overreach, such as the EPA, and get business on the path to doing and becoming innovative the way that they used to be. But in order for that to happen, we have to get them out of the way, the government that is. And how do we get the government out of the way? We have to get the people in D.C. that want the government out of the way. We have to get them moved and replaced with people that will do the right thing.
Karen Handel.
The best way for the United States Senate to be able to promote private sector growth is to implement conservative policies that will foster a climate that will unleash an innovative capacity of small businesses and large businesses alike. We do that. I lay this out in my plan, Karen's plan, that looks at restoring fiscal stability for our country and also restoring the path to prosperity. We need to rewrite that tax code. I favor the fair tax so that we can have a fair-based, consumption-oriented tax. Reduce regulations. We're seeing already the stranglehold that the banking and finance regs under Dodd-Frank have put in place. Companies are spending $1.8 trillion a year for regulatory compliance. So roll back those regulations, reduce spending, and deal with the debt so that we can restore the fiscal stability of our country and at the same time renew the trust in the institution of government to put some sanity and certainty back in the process of governing for this country.
Paul Broun.
Well, said results matter, and I agree with that. In fact, one result that I've brought about to bring jobs to Georgia is whenever I meet with a company representative in Washington, I talk to them about moving to Georgia. I did that with one company. 4 months after I talked to them, I started the whole process. We broke ground for Caterpillar here in Georgia. That's going to bring almost 3,000 or more jobs here to this state. I talked to Baxter Pharmaceuticals the same way. So I've been bringing jobs to Georgia. We've got to get the regulatory burden and tax burden off business and industry. I've introduced the Jobs Act, which would reduce taxes on our job creators and allow businesses to do an immediate write-off of all capital expenditures. I was talking to a famous economist about it, and he said it would spark our economy so strongly that there's no economic model to even guess how big that would be. I talked to a representative of an international company, and he said passing the Jobs Act would make him start looking not only in Georgia but all across this nation to bring jobs and industry back here. We've got to bring manufacturing back, and that's what I've been working on.
Art Gardner.
Well, I've been working full-time for 41 years. In that 41 years, 36 of those years have been in small businesses. I started out working in my dad's family business. I've owned my own small businesses. In fact, for the last 18 years, I've been an owner in my own small firm, and we employ 18 people. So I, more than anybody else in this race, have a unique tie to the small business issues. Now, we do need to reduce the size of government and the size of taxes, because every dollar that's being consumed by the government is a dollar that can't be used in private enterprise. We also need to reduce regulations, but not just in a blanket way. One of the things that's going on in this country is that many of our laws are passed with big businesses in mind. And so we have these very complex regulations which may work fine for the largest businesses in the world, but cripple small businesses. So if you take Dodd-Frank, for example, that bill works really well for larger banks but cripples small banks. So the answer is send somebody to the Senate who is sensitive to the needs of small business.
Thank you. Eighth question is from Ann Lewis, and the first answerer will be Derrick Grayson.
Last summer, the Supreme Court struck down a provision of the Voting Rights Act related to federal pre-clearance of all voting changes in 9 states and parts of 7 others. There's a new proposal to put 4 states, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas, back under the pre-clearance requirements so that we would have to have every voting change pre-approved by the federal government before we could use it. What should the response of Georgia's representatives and senators be, and why?
A resounding no. This is another attempt of the government to divide us based on issues of race. Was there a time in this country when things such as that was necessary? Indeed. Does racism still exist among some people? Absolutely, even within the GOP. But that is no reason to punish America as a whole because of what ideas that people are still trying to hold on. So I think that it should be rejected and fought, and if we strive to get Americans back to obeying and following the Constitution and stop allowing the folk in DC to tell us what's best for us, we'll be a whole lot better off because there are more good people in America than there are bad.
Karen Handel.
We would need to reject this outright. As a former Secretary of State, I know firsthand what it's like to have to fight with the Justice Department for making even the smallest change, common sense change in your elections laws to be able to move forward and try to seek their approval. And it's for things as small as wanting to move a precinct from one location to another, to important things such as photo ID. And many of you will remember the challenges that we had moving forward with photo ID. Under my tenure, we were able to get out from the courts and out from under the Justice Department to implement photo ID. But there are other things like verifying the citizenship of newly registered voters so that we can make sure that only U.S. citizens are voting in our elections, and that took going all the way to a federal court to be able to do that, despite the fact that we knew there were thousands of people who had self-declared themselves as being illegal or being non-citizens in the country. So we need to be able to run our elections. Administering elections has always been in the purview of the states. Georgia should not be subject to a Voting Rights Act pre-clearance issue now based on things of the past.
Paul Broun.
One of the tenets of freedom and liberty is equality under the law. And as far as I'm concerned, not only this law, but others, we need to have policy where everybody's treated equally. The federal government should not pick winners and losers. It should not be involved in doing special treatment for any entity, whether it's a company or a type of energy sector, or whether it's a state or anything else. We need to go back to the basic tenet where everybody in this country is treated equally under the law, and this, as far as I'm concerned, every state or no states should be brought under the Voting Rights Act. But all these things are symptoms of a government that's just totally out of control and left its constitutional bounds of the enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8, and that's exactly what I've been fighting for, is to go back to those principles of limited government as our founding fathers meant it to be.
Art Gardner.
Thank you. The Voting Rights Act was both necessary and a good law when it was passed in the early 60s. But it's not 1964 anymore, and we don't need it. On top of that, this act, like many laws that the federal government passes, has had an unintended consequence. It has contributed to political polarization, because when you take a state like Georgia and you draw the districts along racially gerrymandered lines, it has the effect of creating a more black district, and for example where John Lewis gets elected, and more narrow districts outside of that. I mean, conservative districts outside of that. So we end up with greater polarization. And one of the best things that we could do to ease polarization among the parties would be to end racial gerrymandering of our district lines. So it's time to throw the yoke of the Voting Rights Act off the neck of the South.
Phil Gingrey.
Well, I don't think there's any question that when the Voting Rights Act was passed 39 years ago, there were a lot of Jim Crow laws in Georgia. Thank God we had a mayor of Atlanta, Ivan Allen, at the time, and a governor, Ernest Vanderveer, in the early 60s, who led Georgia forward. And that law and that section was never intended, Ann, as you know, to last for an unlimited period of time, but I would call 39 years pretty much an unlimited period of time. the Congress several years ago reenacted the Voting Rights Act in Section 5, the pre-clearance provision, for another 25 years. But in the state of Georgia, we have gotten to the point where, thank goodness, that the diversity of our state is fully reflected in the makeup of our elected officials, whether they're in the General Assembly or right here in Cobb County. So I think Georgia has proven that there is no discrimination, and there should not be discrimination. So I am totally opposed to any law that would be proposed by a member of Congress to go back and change what the Supreme Court, thank goodness, in their infinite wisdom, made a good decision to finally relieve states like Georgia who have done a good job. And I'm very, very proud of our state, and I think everybody here feels the same way.
The ninth question is Dr. Camilla Moore, and we'll start with Karen Handel.
Most conservatives support a Reaganist devotion to peace through strength. Congress has ordered nearly $500 billion in defense spending cuts over the next decade, causing a harsh reevaluation of military needs. Many conservatives argue that such cuts will devastate America's ability to protect our foreign interests. Do you agree or disagree with these cuts, and would you support the existing cuts?
We cannot balance the budget on the backs of our military men and women. We need to have a strong military in order to protect our country and our freedoms. It's one of the #1 priorities of the federal government to begin with. And as we look at the fiscal instability that has occurred, if we don't deal with the fiscal issues in our country, we're not going to have the dollars we need to adequately fund our military. In addition to adequately funding the military and ensuring that they have the resources they need to act whenever and wherever they are called to act to protect us, we also have got to do a better job in dealing with the issues that our veterans are facing. It is a disgrace, the state of the Veterans Administration. It needs a complete overhaul. We know we're seeing a rising increase in the number of mental health issues, and we need to act now so that we have the infrastructure in place to do right and best by the men and women who have put their lives on the line to protect this nation and to protect every one of us.
Paul Broun.
Camilla, I already mentioned earlier, I'm a U.S. Marine in a sailor's uniform now. I'm in the Navy Reserve. I've been back in the active Navy Reserve for 3.5 years now. I was deployed to Afghanistan. I was over there as a medical doctor taking care of sick and injured Marines and soldiers. We're not taking care of our troops. We're not providing the resources they need to make this a safe nation. I believe in peace through strength. We need to have more brigades in the Army and more wings in the Air Force, more ships in the Navy, more Marines. But our troops need to be taken care of. We're not paying them enough. President Eisenhower warned us about the military military industrial complex, and our whole procurement process is wrong. There's a lot of fraud, waste, and abuse in the military. We've got to change the whole procurement process. We've got to change the budgetary process. And those are the kind of issues that I'll take on as a member of the Senate House Armed Services Committee when people of Georgia send me to the U.S. Senate.
Art Gardner.
What a great question. Virtually all Republicans believe that we need a strong defense and that is absolutely essential. I certainly believe that, and I expect that most everybody in this room does as well. But this question points out the practical difficulty of actually reducing the budget deficit. Very few people are willing to say that we're going to have to reduce spending on the military side. But the reality is we're going to have to reduce spending in many areas. And in order to get that through, for example, in entitlements, you're going to have to be willing to cut some in military spending as well. Otherwise, it'll never happen. Now, the proposed military cuts are largely illusory because what they've proposed is that they're going to reduce the manpower counts and reduce spending on that. But they're going to increase the spending on technology and equipment. And we all know that congressmen and senators all over this country will fight to hold on to those military bases and those manpower numbers. And so those cuts will never materialize. This proposed spending cut program is actually going to end up being a spending increase.
Phil Gingrey.
Two great Republican presidents said, Theodore Roosevelt being one of them, speak softly but carry a big stick. More recently, Ronald Reagan said, our policy should be We win, they lose. And you can't do that without having the proper military strength. You know, as a member of the United States Senate, and that's why I want to go to the United States Senate and be your voice and represent you, you have the power of one, to stop appointments that the president offers to the Senate, like the current Secretary of Defense, Chuck Hagel. He was a Republican senator. The Republicans knew his attitude toward the military. He wasn't for a strong military. And yet, even though they spoke out against him, they backed away from actually standing and strong and being a strong voice and saying, no, we will not accept him. I'm not saying we shouldn't cut the military, Camilla. There should be some cuts, but not in a shotgun approach, only in a rifle approach. We have to stay strong militarily.
Derrick Grayson.
Bombs and drones, who needs the men? All of this, again, is a smokescreen. They don't really care about the troops or the military when you got bombs. I mean, how many nuclear weapons do you need? America is already one of the strongest countries in the world. And most of the things that we're engaged in overseas are foreign entanglements that George Washington warned us against, yet we engage in them anyway. We will close troops here and put soldiers out of work to buy more bombs and bullets to send to places like Libya or Syria. We may even go to the Ukraine. The wake-up call is for us. Our men and women should be top priority, especially when they're committing suicide at a rate of 20 plus or more a day. I've been fighting the cause of the troops for the last 3 or 4 years, and nobody is more passionate about the troops than I am.
Thank you. Let's give all our candidates for tonight a round of applause for this first section of the event. At this time, we are going to take a short break and return with more from our candidates. Welcome back to the Cobb County Republican Women's Candidate Forum. We continue the questions with Megan Hansen and begin with Paul Broun.
A recent study from a nonprofit organization called the State Budget Solutions showed that federal dollars make up 38% of Georgia's state budget, a number that has unfortunately grown since 2001. As a Republican, we want to cut spending. How do we reconcile cutting the federal budget in light of the state's growing dependency on federal money?
I think we have to send powers back to the states or the people. For instance, in my effort to close down the Department of Education, I want to save those dollars here. Just as an example, we're paying $70 billion a year for U.S. Department of Education. The average salary of those fat cat bureaucrats in that department is over $105,000 a year. Most have never taught a child to read. What I say is let's close down the Department of Education, keep the dollars here in Georgia, let's pay our teachers more, let's get the shackles that No Child Left Behind put on our teachers. I call it No Teacher Left Unshackled. And let's get rid of Common Core so that we can pay our teachers more, so that we can have the funds that's necessary to educate our children, so we can have a good world-class education system right here in Georgia. That's just an example of what I'm doing. We've got to find bridges to send those powers back to the states or the people and leave dollars here in Georgia so that we can run our state without the dependence upon the federal government.
Art Gardner.
Well, let's be clear. The federal government taxes us and then chews up some of that money and gives it back to the states to run various programs, for example, education. But when it does that, the federal government chews up a pretty big chunk of it. So there's a certain amount of inherent wastefulness by sending the money to Washington, having them administer the money, and then sending it back to the states for the states to run some program like education. So first of all, it's inefficient to do that. If we did return more of these functions purely to the states, we would overall lower our tax burden somewhat. It's not going to be as dramatic as some people might think. We're going to save some money in tax by eliminating some of the waste at the federal level. We also, though, very importantly, will gain local control. For example, when it comes to education, I know what's best for my children. Beyond that, I trust my Cobb County School Board. Beyond that, the state, and at the very end of that spectrum, the federal government. They know the least about what's best for our kids.
Phil Gingrey.
Megan, an absolutely great question. If we're going to honor and respect the 10th Amendment, we ought to understand exactly what Megan said. Every time we get a dollar from Washington, believe me, it comes with strings attached. And we don't worry about the strings, but pretty soon those strings become ropes, and pretty soon those ropes start strangling us. Now, we obviously need a balanced budget amendment at the federal government level when 49 states have balanced budget constitutions. But you know why we're not passing it? Because so many of these states, and I could name names, but you could name the same ones, they're getting more than their fair share of government largesse, and they don't want the federal government to balance its budget because they're getting more than their fair share, but always, always with strings attached. So we need to wean ourselves off of the federal government and read and interpret and know what the 10th Amendment says.
Derrick Grayson.
Just as our government has created a culture of dependence amongst individual citizens, Obama phones, food stamps, Section 8 housing, the government has essentially done the same thing for our states. We're just a big glorified individual on welfare assistance. If we want to stop that, and I can't say it enough, we have to get back to our constitutional principles. But we need representatives, we need senators that understand that and are willing to go and fight for that. Because if we don't, we will continue to suffer at the hands of government's overreach and their influence to drive our policies. Get government out of the way and let private individuals create jobs, because that's not government's responsibility. Once jobs are created, individuals can then begin to realize the American dream, to be self-sufficient.
Karen Handel.
The growing dependence of the states on the federal budget underscores why we have to have a very systematic approach to how we overhaul the budgeting process at the federal level. So a couple of things. One, we need to move to a 2-year budget cycle at the federal level with a balanced budget so that we're focusing not just always on how much more we're going to spend, but let's spend time on why we are spending these dollars. Are they appropriate programs for the federal level, or do they rightly belong at the state level? Are they programs that have simply been funded for no other reason than they've always been funded? Number 2, zero-based budgeting so that we can go through every department and agency on a staggered basis with a fine-tooth comb, seeking out those programs that we can roll back to the state, and making sure that we do this in partnership with our state and local officials, because it doesn't accomplish a thing if the federal government cuts at the federal level only to pass the buck down to our state or our county or city officials.
Our next question is from Ann Lewis, and we'll begin with Art Gardner.
Although Democrats and Republicans have different philosophies, a successful member of the Senate has to know how to be able to get the votes needed to pass legislation that is important to his or her constituents. What are 3 qualities that you have that will make you successful in garnering the votes you need from other members of the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, to pass legislation that's important to all of us?
Art Gardner.
Well, first of all, in my work, I'm a patent lawyer, and half of what I do is litigation. And in my litigation work, I fight hard with the opponent. We have a completely different view of how the case ought to be resolved. I think one thing and the opponent thinks the exact opposite. And we fight very hard, but we do so in a very civil manner with respect and politeness. And that allows me, at the end of the day, to sit down with my opponent and work it out, to make a deal that's good for my client and for my opponent's client, a true win-win. That's the sort of quality that I'll take to the United States Senate, because it's not my way or the highway in the United States Senate. If someone's thinking that they're going to go up there and they're going to tell the other senators how it's going to be, they are sadly mistaken. It's about consensus building. It's about understanding the other people in the room and what their mindset is, and building relationships. That's how you get it done.
Phil Gingrey.
And I often think about the prayer of St. Francis, the courage to change the things that you can change, the serenity to accept the things that you can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference. But the 3 qualities that I've got, of course, is I've been in the private sector as a physician. I've learned to listen. I was taught that in medical school. If you listen to the patient, 90% of the time they'll tell you what's wrong with them. I would be willing to sit down and listen to anybody. And I've got good judgment. I've spent 12 years, of course, in the House of Representatives. So that mix, that balance, is what gives me the ability, and thirdly, in sitting down with other people, to respect their opinion even if you don't agree with them, and you know that you're not going to violate or sacrifice Georgia principles and go along with something just to get along. So those 3 qualities are what I think it takes to be a good United States Senator, and why I feel like that I'm the most qualified among the 7 of us to represent Georgia.
Derrick Grayson.
My approach is different. I believe that light is cleansing. One of the things that they engage in Washington, D.C. is that they have excluded the American people from the process. This is why and how they are able to pass legislation that we find out about after the fact. Can you say Edward Snowden? Had we known in advance what they were up to, we would not have stood for it, but they exclude us. I plan to go to Washington with 100% of the Constitution, 100% of the time. I plan to take the power of the people to Washington, D.C. And how is that power utilized? By exposing those that would violate your constitutional protections and your civil liberties. Doing that, that is how you change the room, because when people are observed, they tend to do things a little differently.
Karen Handel.
Just as on the Fulton County Commission as chairman, I was one of 7, in the United States Senate, I would be one of 100. And you don't get to go there and be the CEO of the other 99. And what I know about problem solving is this: first and foremost, look at the issue, the facts, and identify the best right solution to the issue or the problem, and manage your politics second. Number 2, try to look at the issue through the eyes of the person that you're negotiating with, not because you're necessarily going to agree with them, but because that gives you an understanding of their filter and the way they're seeing the issue. And number 3, and always understanding what I believe and what my convictions are, because I believe you can negotiate for progress. That's not the same as compromising principle. And lastly, having great resolve, because in virtually every position I've ever had, people gave me absolutely no chance of being able to do a thing on the Fulton County Commission, let alone being able to get 4 votes to hold off a tax increase, 4 votes to pass strong ethics reform, and same with implementing photo ID.
Thank you. Paul Broun.
And what I've been doing in Congress ever since I've been there is trying to work with other members of Congress, no matter what party they believe that they represent, no matter what they believe from across the political spectrum. In fact, when the housing market crashed in 2008, Peter DeFazio, a Republican, Democrat Republican from Oregon, and I were working on some housing bills to try to get people back in their houses where they can afford them. Right now today, I'm working with Congressman Barbara Lee from California, who's part of the Congressional Black Caucus and Progressive Caucus, to try to protect people's civil rights and our liberties, to try to stop the federal government from being able to lock up U.S. citizens and hold them indefinitely without having a lawyer, without being charged for any crime. But I'm a physician, I'm a family doctor, I listen to people, and I do respect people, and I think it's through education that we get other people to come alongside. Phil Gingrey, back when he was head of GOPAC, had 4 principles: listen, lead, help. Listen, learn, help, and lead, and that's exactly what I'll do as a U.S. Senator.
Thank you. Our final question is from Dr. Camilla Moore, and we'll begin with Phil Gingrey.
With the recent increase in gun-related shootings, the Second Amendment has increasingly come under attack. There's a recent study that indicates that many of the shooters had mental health issues. How would you protect the Second Amendment in light of these studies?
Dr. Moore, I think we have sufficient number of laws in this country, and I am a strong defender of the Second Amendment. I've received an A+ rating from the National Rifle Association every year that I've been a member of Congress, and this is my 12th year. So I don't think we necessarily need more laws and more restrictions. A person in the Supreme Court made this very clear, that an individual, not just a militia, but an individual has a right to bear arms and defend themselves and protect their family. So I think that's very, very important. Now, as you point out, there's a lot of mental illness, and any time, and the law says, current law, if somebody has been adjudicated and put in a mental facility for treatment, just like a convicted felon, they do not have the right. In fact, they should be put on the National Instant Background Check data list so that they can't purchase a weapon. And certainly I agree with that, just like they made that change in Virginia to make sure that that was abided by after that horrible shooting at Virginia Tech several years ago.
Derrick Grayson.
Absolutely no laws infringing upon the right of an individual to bear arms. Period. No exceptions. And that is for law-abiding citizens. And make no mistake about this. Had it not been for cell phones with video and people's right to bear arms at the Bundy Ranch, it would have been a bloodbath. But it wasn't, because of the Second Amendment and because we were able to be the media by showing exactly what was going on, things that you didn't really hear about in corporate-backed media. So I am pro Second Amendment all the way and all day. That's 100% of the Constitution, 100% of the time.
Karen Handel.
I'm going to stand strong in support of our Second Amendment, and we have to resist the temptation to let emotions from tragedies be a vehicle to undermine our Second Amendment rights. With that said, when we look at the state of mental health in our country, we do need to have overalls there, and Georgia and many other states are moving in that direction to be able to do more and have more robust support and infrastructure for those who have mental health issues. That also leads me back to the overhaul with the Veterans Administration so that we can make sure we get prepared with a good infrastructure, with more mental health professionals and greater access for our military men and women who are coming back, and we're seeing such high incident rates there, the suicide rates and things of that nature, and we need to get very serious about that in investing and building out that infrastructure for the men and women who have worked so hard and put so much on the line for this country.
Paul Broun.
I'm the chairman of the Second Amendment Task Force in the U.S. House fighting to protect your Second Amendment rights. In fact, we must never, ever lose our individual right to own a gun. My campaign for the U.S. Senate has been endorsed by Gun Owners of America, as well as the National Association for Gun Rights. As I've already mentioned, the Second Amendment and the First Amendment are the guardians of our liberty, and we must not lose those rights. And I'll do everything I can to make sure that that your right to own a gun is protected. I am a medical doctor. I'm in the Navy as a medical doctor. I see patients, and I have seen patients in Afghanistan as well as here. When I drill, I go to Quantico, to the Navy Health Clinic, to the Marine Corps base Quantico. And we've got mental health issues, but we've got to protect your individual right to own a gun as a law-abiding citizen, and I'll do everything I can to do so.
Art Gardner.
Well, I'm a strong proponent of the Second Amendment myself, and I believe all of the candidates in the race are as well, perhaps save one. The Second Amendment doesn't just exist to ensure that we can hunt or protect ourselves. The Second Amendment is there in part to protect us against tyranny. It protects us against overreach by the government, and it is essential that the Second Amendment be protected. Now, in recent years, we've seen a lot of mass violence. Some of that's by folks with guns. Some of that is by people with cars. Some of that's by people with a knife. And the common thread through all of that is that the people are mentally disturbed. So I don't have the answers to mental health problems, but the answer is certainly not restricting gun rights.
Thank you. The candidates will now give their 2-minute closing statements. Ahead of this broadcast, they drew numbers to determine the order of their closing. So I will call on each of you based on that order. Paul Broun goes first in his 2-minute closing statement.
Friends, our federal government is totally out of control. It's spending too much, taxing too much, regulating too much, borrowing too much. Both parties are guilty, and that must stop. And all of that's true because the federal government, in both parties' leadership, has left the constitutional bounds. There are 4 questions I ask about all legislation. I've done this for the 6.5 years I've been in the U.S. House. The first one is it constitutional according to the original intent? Is it one of the 18 enumerated powers in Article 1, Section 8? The second question, is it right? Does it fit the Judeo-Christian biblical principles our nation was founded upon? 3, do we need it? 4, can we afford it? If all 4 yes, I vote yes. If one's no, I vote no. And I'll pledge to you as your U.S. Senator, that's exactly how I'll vote. I've never voted for a stimulus package. I've never voted for a bailout. I've never voted to raise taxes on anybody. In fact, President Obama has proposed, just since he's been in office, 422 increases in taxes. Just in the last year, this Congress, I've proposed, I think, almost a dozen or over a dozen tax decreases. My Patient Option Act repeals Obamacare and replaces it so that you can manage your own health care decisions. It's your insurance, your doctor, your choice. We've got to stop this out-of-control government that both parties have created, and that's what I've been doing. I would appreciate your vote. I'd appreciate your support. Most of all, I'd appreciate your prayers. So please vote for Paul Broun, for liberty and freedom, for your children and your grandchildren's future. We've just got to stop this out-of-control government Send powers back to the states or the people as the 10th Amendment says it should be. And that's what I've been fighting for. And that's exactly what I'll do as your U.S. Senator. You can know where I'm going as your senator because you can see where I've been as your congressman. Vote Paul Broun for the U.S. Senate.
Thank you. Karen Handel.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity tonight. As we head into May 20th on the primary date, we have two considerations. Number one, who will be the best individual to represent Georgia in the United States Senate? And number two, who's the strongest candidate to beat Michelle Nunn? This is not about those who self-proclaim themselves as the most conservative or the outsider. Isn't it really about who will be an effective United States Senator for our country and our state? I have a proven track record of actually putting conservative principles into practice, and I've done it in some of the toughest of environments. When it comes to who is the strongest candidate in this race, there's a reason that Nate Silver, Weekly Standard, National Journal, Sarah Palin, Governor Jan Brewer have all concluded that I'm the strongest person to take her on and win. They know the playbook that the Democrats are going to run, war on women, income equality. They know we need a candidate who has been vetted and tested under the hot glare of the media. Well, and I've had that, and I've lived to tell about it. They know the headlines that some in this race have already generated that will play right into the hands of the Democrats. That's why we need to have the strongest candidate, because we must get that GOP majority in the United States Senate. When I was young, I never could have imagined the path that my life could take. I left home at 17 to move out of a troubled environment. I worked really hard, finished up high school, got a job, got some college, but I worked my way up through hard work and tenacity. But what I know is that a great God and an extraordinary country afforded a young girl the opportunity to be whatever it was she wanted to be when she grew up. That's what this race is about. Ronald Reagan, shortly after he was elected, told our country that our best days were ahead. And he spoke to me as a young girl trying to make it on my own. I'm running for United States Senate because I want our best days to still be ahead. I ask for your vote on May 20th, but know that I'm going to work very hard to earn it so that together we will have the guts and the resolve to make the hard decisions today that we need to make to preserve the future of opportunity and freedoms for the next generations. Thank you, and God bless you.
Derrick Grayson.
All the darkness in the world can't snuff out the light of a single candle. Light represents truth. There is one thing that I have been consistent about in all of the debates and since I have been on this campaign trail. One, I only promise you 100% of the Constitution 100% of the time. Absolutely nothing extra. I'll treat you as I would any other American citizen by representing the interests of this state. I don't want to go to D.C. to remove bad policy or legislation and replace it with something else that the government has no business being involved in, such as Obamacare. And I don't care if people refer to themselves as a conservative, the true conservative, a Republican, because that's irrelevant to me if you are violating my civil liberties and you are violating my constitutional protections. And for those of you that think that I don't have a chance, it was a 3% tax in the Boston Tea Party that gave us our Constitution, a Declaration of Independence, and our Bill of Rights. A little quick history lesson. A guy by the name of Copernicus realized that the earth was not the center of the universe, but he was afraid to reveal that information because he would be killed as a heretic. He went to his death before letting that information out because he didn't have a Constitution, a Bill of Rights, or Declaration of Independence. We have all those things, and the power belongs with you, not with me. If you send me to that room, I promise you, I will change it, and I will not go along to get along. I'm going to serve, not lead. Thank you.
Phil Gingrey.
I want to thank the Cobb County Women's Association for having this forum tonight. I'm deeply appreciative of giving us this opportunity. Listen, my fellow Cobb Countyans, this is the most important election in my lifetime, and I think it's the most important election in your lifetime. And clearly, we need to win in November. We need to win this seat. We need to take over the Senate. We need to get rid of Harry Reid. We need to tee it up for 2016 so we have a Republican president. So as you look at there are only 5 of us here tonight, but the 7 candidates in the Republican primary, you need to pick the most conservative of us who can win in November. I am that person. I don't have hard edges. I get along with people, but I don't sacrifice my principles either. I stand strong for those. And as I look at the Senate now and our Republican minority instead of a majority, I see some weakness. I definitely see some weakness. And we need some backbone. We need a strong vertebrae. We need to end the scoliosis, if you will. We need to straighten the spine. And people that are willing to stand strong for principles, for Georgia principles, for faith and family, and the sanctity of life. And not back away from the fight. Run to the fight. Stand strong. And I've spent 12 years almost now in the United States House of Representatives. As I said at the outset, I'm a doctor. I'm not a professional politician. But the knowledge that I've gained during these 12 years, particularly on health care, I can't run away from the fight. I have to be your voice. I have to stay there and fight for you. I'm willing. I want to do it. I want to give my heart and soul to it. I want you to elect me to be your voice in the United States Senate, and I'll never let you down. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you. Art Gardner.
Thank you. If you wanted someone who's not a politician, if you want someone who hasn't been in the Congress for some number of years, I'm the best qualified candidate of what is left, by far. I'm not a Me Too candidate. I say things the other candidates won't say. Now, we all are budget conservatives. We're all out to solve the budget problem. But on my website at gardnersenate.com, I put a very detailed plan of how we're going to do that. Don't trust a politician who says they want to balance the budget, but won't tell you how they're going to do it because they're not serious. They just want to get elected. Now, another thing is, I believe in Ronald Reagan's big tent GOP. Everybody is a fiscal conservative in the Republican universe, and we're all defense conservatives. But where we tend to have disagreements is on social issues. If we can, as a party, find a way to nominate and elect folks who are fiscal conservatives and defense conservatives, and just agree to disagree on the social issues, we will attract more people to our party. We will attract more women to our party. We will attract more minorities to our party. We'll attract gays back to our party, and we will attract young people back to our party in big numbers. That's the key to winning elections, and it is essential that our party win elections. We don't need to elect the person who's the most conservative. That's not the key to success. We need to grow this party to stop the left agenda of the Democrats. And to do that, we need to broaden our base. That means we've got to focus on what matters, which is governance, and not social issues, which are being pushed by social conservatives. That path leads to more Democrat victories, fewer Republican victories, and America will be worse off. I ask for your vote and your support, and I'll be proud to be your next senator. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to please give these candidates a round of applause for the U.S. Senate. And I'd like to thank all of you for coming out tonight and for you being in the audience, because it's great to have you here. At this time, I'd like to invite back up Cobb County Republican Women's Club President Barbara Hickey, who will make a few closing remarks.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, candidates, for your participation in tonight's forum. You did a great job, all of you. And I want to thank the Cobb County Board of Commissioners, TV 23 staff, and Martha Zoller, our moderator. Let's hear it for all of them again. I want to thank Tanya Boga and Rose Wing. They're right up here in the front, and this is a lot of work. Our campaign forum chairs and the following committee have worked like a fine-oiled machine, as CP says. Let me read their names, and would you please stand up, you volunteers. Melissa Bottoms, Martha Dearman, Sharon Herndon, Susan Roberts, Millie Rogers, Donna Rowe, Kim Shirk, Cindy Thyler, Janelle Woody, Priscilla Villa, and our hostesses, Dorothy Baskin, Billy Dendy, Dee Gay, Cheryl Lenny, Helen Story, and Chris Waldman. What a team. Well, it takes a team, and we hope tonight's forum has been beneficial and informative, and that you will watch our next forum on Thursday, April 17th at 7:00 p.m. here on Channel TV 23. It will be candidates for Cobb County Solicitor General, Cobb County Superior Court Judge, filling the seat of Judge Jim Bodiford, and candidates for State Representative District 34 and District 44. Thank you for watching and attending the Cobb County Republican Women's Forum. Good night and good voting.